Hello and welcome to My Favorite Product. Happy to be here for another episode. We've got a great guest today, Deepa Goyal. Hi, Deepa.
Hi, John. Very excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here and excited to learn more about you and your favorite product. And I heard you actually had a hard time picking a product as a true product manager might.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you reached out and you were like, "Oh, we're going to name your favorite product," and my mind just went so many different directions, and I think one of the one of the things I thought about a few software products at first, and then I thought about some enterprise products and some hardware products, just so that we have a little broader set of things to talk about. So my software product, my favorite software product, was the one I picked, and we'll be talking about more, is Canva. For those who don't know, it's a web-based tool for creating content, visual content. I have been using them for many years now since they came out, and they're one of the highest valued startups in the world now, and they're just really incredible. The other software product that I was thinking about was actually Descript, which is a video editing software, which I think you will love, John, as you
I need
edit this video. Um, and that one is, although we wouldn't be diving into it much today, but I do want to mention is they have really taken a very first principles approach to video editing. And that's something that I find truly mind-blowing. It's just people who did not really grow up with traditional tools, when now they think about like, oh, there's this technology, and they go like, this is how I want to edit videos. And they come up with a solution that doesn't look like what video editing used to look like, but it really works. And
interesting.
I think that's a great example of like solving a problem with a fresh mind.
Right.
That's why I love that. Innovating.
Yeah, that's great.
And the third product I thought about was the hardware software combination, was a smart bassinet, which is called Snoo. And they recently got FDA approval, which is huge. Getting FDA approval now, insurance can cover it and all that. But I think it's really incredible how they innovated something as simple as a bassinet, and just they engineered the motion of the baby so that it puts the baby to sleep and helps baby sleep longer. It's such a game changer for new parents, but I think there's also a lot of interesting approaches they did in terms of pricing. So they allow you to rent the product instead of having to always buy it, because of course people only need it for some time, and you only need bassinet for a few months when you have a baby. So that's really innovative in terms of like pricing, very interesting pricing strategy based on your product and how people use it. And the final one I was thinking about was Samsara, which is an enterprise IoT company. And they took something as simple as like, oh, you can track trucks on a map, but then they applied it to enterprise problems, is where you have fleets of trucks. And as a company, if you're managing fleets of trucks, you can see their location, but then it also does a lot of smart alerting in terms of the drivers being like, oh, you violated a stop sign, or there's a signal ahead, or things like that. Because in commercial transportation, there's a lot of insurance involved, and they want there's a lot of monitoring to the drivers. Professional truck drivers is it's a really complicated thing. So I think that's also another like really interesting application of some of the things that exist and we are familiar with, like we see Uber tracking our car, but I think that's a interesting application. So these are my 4 picks, and I think
this is the dilemma you had.
But I think this is a really interesting conversation, because anybody who comes to this podcast, I think I really want to enable them to think about product as a whole, and not be limited in their thinking of like as just software or just hardware, and really be able to open their mind in terms of like, here's a problem, and now you can come up with anything in terms of how you can solve it.
It's an exciting time, and you're right. And I agree with you. I think we're both in the software space, in our product management jobs. And I think thinking about hardware, thinking about industrial design, whatever it might be, kind of stepping outside of that, of the software space is really important. So it's great to hear all the other candidates that you had in mind. I'll probably gravitate more toward Descript because for those watching this video now, they're probably like, gosh, you could really have done a better job, with the intros or the editing and all that. My children are 10, so I don't think the bassinet's going to help me much. But you've got you have had a really exciting career, really interesting career. Before we jump into Canva, which I actually just started using yesterday, and that's not because I knew you were coming on to talk about it. It was just circumstance and coincidence. So it's funny you picked that one. But before we go there, I would love to learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell us more about your journey in product management?
Absolutely. So I actually started my career as a data engineer. I think during my computer science engineering, it became very clear to me that I love data, and that's where I want my career to go. And I started as a data engineer. I got really fascinated with not just like moving data around, but also interpreting data. That has always been like a very fascinating thing to me. So I continued my journey into data science. I worked in data science for a number of years. And then I was like, okay, data allows me to identify problems and spot opportunities. But if I was a product manager, then I can also think solutions. So
yeah,
that was really the trigger for me to make that transition into product. Was it's like, now I have the toolkit to look at data, structured, unstructured data, and be able to interpret. And now that I know what the problem is, I want to drive the solutions, and I want to see the impact on customers, on business. So that was really the thought process moving into product. I was a growth product manager at Prosper, which is an online lending company. I also worked with their pricing tools and other machine learning aspects that work in the background. In the finance space is very fascinating in that regard. And I got really fascinated by APIs when I was working there. And that drove my decision to join Twilio, where I was working on their serverless tools and helping broaden their developer persona from like just core programmers to also low-code, no-code users, and just evolving that developer identity and addressing their needs, which was really fun. And then I was head of developer experience at PayPal. And that was really fun because they have been doing APIs for so long, and they have a huge developer community. It's a great place to work on APIs. And currently, I lead product strategy at Postman, which is an API tool.
There you go.
So here I get to help a lot of different companies build successful APIs. So that has really been my journey into APIs, and I was able to put together my experience in data and APIs, and of course, combining that, analytics has been a key focus for me. And I recently published a book called API Analytics for Product Managers that recently came out to help other PMs break into API product management and technical product management in general, and use data to power their decisions and really build product strategies with great metrics strategy.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And I love it when really talented product people take all their learnings through the years and publish it in the, whatever form they want. But in your case, a book, I think that's fantastic. So, and we'll plug it at the end, but just in case, where can people, is it Amazon, or where should people go?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Find it. Okay. Awesome. All right, so let's jump right into to Canva. As I mentioned, I'm a new user, not even 24 hours in here to my Canva journey. But tell us what problem you think Canva solves and what it's doing for you.
So I think Canva is again one of those products that really took a problem that has actually been solved before. Like Adobe has been doing this for a long time.
Right.
There is Illustrator, Photoshop, and all those things. But what they did is they really identified a customer segment, which is social media marketing managers and content creators. And they just the sheer volume of that problem is fairly large, and they really lowered the barrier to entry for creating visual content, and
Yes.
they've really done it wonderfully. And of course now it's not just social media, the platform allows you to create books. People are designing children's books on it. People are creating, now they have tools for whiteboarding, creating presentations and things like that. It's a very broad set of tools now. But I think just the way they took this one problem and approached it with a very simple user experience, there is, it's very easy to learn. You don't need a tutorial to get started with it.
Right.
I think that intuitive design and solving a problem in a very simple way, I think that's really what I admire about Canva.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think of that. I had previously used competitive tools to them, maybe some of the ones you mentioned earlier, and it did feel like I needed that tutorial. It was hard to get started. And yeah, that's really interesting how they've really simplified that experience of just getting going right off the bat. What else delights you about Canva? What have you kind of noticed with your product lens?
I think they also approached this problem of graphics really innovatively. They have a lot of like pre-designed illustrations that you can use in your material. So for the longest time, the approach for graphics and visuals has been stock imagery, where you have to buy it one by one, or designers would essentially like even in terms of illustrations, they would upload bundles and you have to buy bundles and things like that. But realistically, it still continues to be a problem in terms of like you have to download it, and then you have all these files and all these formats. Sometimes they don't work, but they just cut through all that. And you have an inbuilt library of illustrations that you can search. It is very searchable. And you can, if you're paying for Canva Premium, then you get a bigger library. But essentially, when you're trying to create something as simple as, let's say, a poster, or just trying to even create, let's say, a presentation slide, and you just want some simple illustrations to illustrate your idea, you don't need very expert level graphics. So but they created this very simple library. You can drag and drop and just build your idea. And they also have this ability to, when you start, you can pick different sizes by like Instagram story or Instagram post or Pinterest or things like that, which actually it might seem really simple, but like when you're using Adobe Illustrator, for example, you have to first Google what's the size you need and then start. So for a new user just trying to create some images or stories, it's actually a lot of work that they have really reduced to just clicking one thing from a drop down and getting started. So that's really amazing how they have really studied the user journey and looked at what are the things that are time consuming or that are particularly hard for people who are doing this for the first time, and trying to solve it simply and beautifully.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know this wasn't one of the questions I sent over at the beginning, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm curious if you think there's something to do with, you mentioned their demographic or their target audience. You hear a lot about instant gratification, maybe with certain generations, right? And I fall under this too, maybe not from an age perspective, but from my demands of like, I just want to get started and get moving. and how they've reduced the friction right around the product. If I just want to get in and start building a new resume or a PowerPoint template or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
do you feel like they've got that in mind consciously? I want to help people kind of move quickly and get what they want faster.
As a product manager, I think phrasing of even customer behavior is very important. So I'll take that opportunity to, when I think about people having, the phrase of like, oh, people have low attention span. I kind of think of it more in terms of people don't have time.
Right.
Or just things are moving really fast, or people have the need to produce.
You put a
really
positive
fast.
spin on it. Yeah.
and it's really their problem, right? It's like, if I'm a social media marketer, I need to post 10 images a day, then production volume is actually a challenge for me. So it's not that I don't have attention span. It's really, I just have a lot to do. So I think it helps you when you phrase things that way from like the customer lens. I think that really helps think of the problem differently. It does, and builds empathy for the user. And I think what they have done is really thought about that problem of like, if people have this need to, I have to post a story every day, I have to post 5 stories every day, because when I know a lot of content creators and social media influencers, and they're very conscious about like I have to post 10 things today, and I have to post 10 things every day, otherwise nobody sees me. So just the space being so competitive, the content space being so crowded, has conditioned people to want to create a lot at a very high speed. And what Canva has done is allowed you to use pre-created like templates and be able to modify them really quickly. And then they were able to create a scheduler that is inbuilt. And that's, of course, powered by APIs. So they have great integration.
Had a feeling you'd lace that in at some point, maybe more than once, right?
So it's really amazing how they got that Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, all those integrations in there. So you can just like create all your content and schedule it. And what I've seen people do is, when social media marketers, they actually have multiple clients. So you can create branding bundles and do that at a fast pace. So I think that production volume and pace is something that Canva really enables. And that's really the problem they've solved, is how do you create content really fast and like a lot of content. So I think that's really powerful.
Oh, really cool. So I love this question, because we're going to flip it over a little bit now. If you had to give some constructive feedback to the product team at Canva, what might you say? What are some of the things they might improve on or kind of look into?
Absolutely. I think, that's always the product challenge of like, what's next? What now? Right? What's the next demographic? Sure. And I think there are some kind of now that people use Canva and use it quite a bit, there are some things that, product choices that they made before that they might need to revisit. For example, like their file management. If I'm creating 200 projects in Canva, I think managing them or viewing them is actually really hard. And I think the other thing is some things that have existed before, like Illustrator allows you to have multiple canvases in a single folder. That's not something that Canva does. But that's also on the lines of like, how do you think about how users are managing projects? Because I'm not always creating an Instagram story. I also want to create a post that goes with it, and I want to create multiple platforms in one go. But this is more, the way they approach it is a little different, which is always one platform at a time.
Yeah, singular. And right.
Yeah. So there's some previous decisions that they have made that kind of restrict the usability of the product in some ways. And I think there's also the the evolution of like, where do you go from now? I think there is a huge opportunity for Canva to, and this might be like, I don't know if they're trying to do it already, but I wish Canva would replace PowerPoint.
That's a big ask. There's a lot, but maybe not tomorrow, right? But over time.
It's a great opportunity. I think that would be my like growth advice to them.
Yeah. So you think it could? You think over time it could replace PowerPoint as a new?
Absolutely. I think it already has all the ingredients. You can create slides in it. You have all these graphics, all the text, and you have presentation capabilities, and you also have export to video capabilities. So I think it already has all the ingredients. It's just like, changing a few things here and there, and it's a completely new recipe. So
yeah, I love it. I think there's a lot of people out there that would be rooting for that as a solution, and interesting that nothing has replaced PowerPoint since its inception. So yeah, maybe I wonder if that's in their sites on the Canva team. Really interesting. So last question I like to ask is, how has your time with Canva made you a better product leader?
I think having used Canva over the years and seeing the product evolve over time has really allowed me to see a few things, like just observe, learning by observation is one of the things, is just the focus on the customer. Just amazing. Like, they are really loyal to their ideal customer.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. And their original mission of keeping it simple. I think everything they do as they add features and everything continues to be very simple, and it's not focused towards the expert. It's continues to be focused towards the people who are not already aware of like 25 different tools to do this, or have been doing it for 15 years. But people who are jumping in, want to get something done, keeping it simple. I think that is one thing that I really learned from it. The other thing is just also growth, the evolution of product in terms of like, what features would you add when you're thinking of prioritization, and there's n number of things you could be doing. How do you pick and choose what you do? But I think the other thing they do really well is actually identifying MVPs. When they had the whiteboarding, they also have a document feature now, and I used it in the early stages of like MVP stage, and I think they generally do a great job of identifying what are the minimum features,
the essence of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, and testing them out with your audience, and trying to get that early feedback. That I think that has allowed them to continue to keep the product simple, because they're doing so much learning from how people interact with the product. And I think those are things that I've seen them do over time that have definitely made me a better product manager.
I struggle with that each day, which is which features do we want to add? Which features do we want to keep? And I always say to the team that I manage, there's only so much room in the boat. And sometimes we have to throw stuff off the boat, especially if we're going to bring stuff in. I think there is that the economics component to it that's so hard in a lot of ways. But it sounds like you're really impressed with the way Canva has been able to manage that and keep the product simple, yet still cater to new audiences or build new things. Did I have that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other challenge that starts to happen when you have a product at that maturity level, where you already have a lot of features and offerings, is also performance. So you want to make sure that there is a certain standard of performance that continues for your product. And I think those are some of the challenges we start to think about as product managers, right? Is like, you can add 25 different features, but then what does that mean in terms of performance? Will it continue to be as smooth, or will it get clunky?
Yeah, that's great. I love this, by the way. I'm taking all of this in, and I started this show just to be, with asking folks to come on and talk about their favorite product, and it ends up being this masterclass in how to approach product management. So I'm always just amazed at all of the wisdom that comes out in these questions. So or from the answers to these questions. So quite amazing. So Deepa, I think I've learned a lot just about how we think about products and how Canva thinks about products. And hopefully, in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, someone comes on here with your book as their favorite product. I think that would be great. Just this morning, just to plug it a little bit, we had an API question come in from a customer. We had to go run some stats to see who's using it and if there's, certain demand put on the APIs at certain times during the day and what we could do around rate limits. So I think we all live in this world that you've written about. We could all stand to learn more about this world too. So I think it's super important, but don't let me talk about it. I want to hear from you. For all the PMs, the product people listening, or for anyone really listening to the show, why would it be important to go out and get the book?
Absolutely. I think the way I think about it is there has been, like, for example, like 15 years ago, the only people who were doing abandoned cart or checkout related campaigns were probably like Walmart or Macy's and Gap, who were the only people who had these online stores and had this big infrastructure. And then over the years we have seen things like Shopify really simplify it, and now anybody can create an online store and have all these things, all these analytics right off the bat, like inbuilt in the product. And I think what we're seeing now is it's not there has been a lot of evolution in terms of web products and what analytics and what metrics you follow to measure them. You get views or click-throughs, or there's a lot of metrics that are now predefined and also offered out of the box by analytics tools. But where it starts to break down is actually things like APIs, which are harder for people to still think about, like what would be the ideal metric, and especially it gets challenging when the API is the product. Yeah. So like at Twilio, it's like APIs are what we build. It's not a web experience, so it's not going to be web page views. So how do we think about all these thousands of companies using these APIs are building a lot of different things using your APIs. So now you're also not limited to a use case. Your success definition needs to evolve to this problem of, like, your product might be serving many use cases, and success means different things to different customers. So I think that's the abstract level that we have reached in terms of API product management and technical product management in general. And I think where measurement is such a central part of the product responsibility, ultimately we're trying to move metric. We have to be able to identify the right metric. When your customer asks you a question about the API, you have to be able to ask the right questions of, like, oh, let me see who's using it. So those questions I have tried to give a handbook to new PMs just jumping into technical product management or API product management, any founders who are building APIs as products, or anybody building anything around APIs. I think I'm hoping that my book can help them get started and be able to identify the right metrics and find the right analytic strategy and product strategy for them.
It's awesome. It's super valuable. I mean, I think discovery is the lifeblood of product managers, and I think APIs in today's world are the lifeblood of technology products, especially as every product now becomes a platform. We're all relying on APIs. So you've been able to take those two concepts and marry them, which I think is just an incredible topic that everyone should delve into. Deepa, thanks for telling us about the book. Thanks for telling us about Canva, and thanks for being here. It was great hanging out.
Thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I look forward to having more of these.
Awesome. We'll have you back. Thanks, Deepa.
Thank you.